What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we are covering where do bass go in the winter and the best ways to catch them. When water temps fall into the 50s, the 40s, or even the high 30s, bass across the country become very predictable. They slide to deeper water, more stable water, they group up tighter, and they relate to heavy cover. Brush piles, rock points, rock piles, stumps, deeper dock pilings, stuff that you would think that they would relate to. Now, depending on if you're fishing a baitfish fishery or a crawdad fishery, you're gonna approach it a little bit differently. But for the most part, fishing in the wintertime can be very predictable and a lot of fun. So in today's video, we're gonna talk about the different types of fisheries. Highland reservoirs, lowland reservoirs, river systems or tidal systems, natural lakes, and ponds. We're gonna take a deep dive into the different types of fisheries and where these fish are going to position in those fisheries. And then of course, the best ways to catch them. Now, before I get into that, I want to give you guys a few tips on just fishing in the wintertime, right? You know, it's completely different when you have the elements out there. You have the chances of cold winter storms. So make sure that you are wearing the proper gear. Make sure that you have a spare set of clothes in the boat or on the kayak or in your truck if you're a shore-based guy. Make sure you have a change of clothes and a towel, something that you can change into if you fall in the water, because I've done it. I flipped my kayak in the low 50s water temps. That was not fun. Lost all my rods, all my gear, my phone, my wallet, all my GoPro batteries. It happens. Doesn't matter if you're the most seasoned angler out there or a rookie or a newbie. It happens. So just be smart about that. So make sure that you have a good clothing on in the first place, and make sure that you have a change of clothes in case something happens. But as far as, and I'm not trying to scare you guys, I'm just trying to tell you guys to be smart. But as far as fishing, most people think wintertime fishing, slow down. Dragging that drop shot or dragging that jig, which works, right? Just a week or so ago, I did my top 5 baits for the month of December. If you haven't watched that, you can go watch that. That's gonna have some of the baits that I'm talking about today. Today I'll have a couple of different baits just because we're not limiting it to 5. But it's not always about slowing down. You know, we're still covering water. We're still throwing the A-rig. We're still throwing our swim baits and our speed cranks. You know, those baits were designed to catch big fish right now in the winter. These fish are looking for big meals. They don't want to spend or waste a lot of energy chasing down and eating little things. If they could eat big things, a big meal or big swim bait or a big jig, they have a lot more drawing power. They're willing to literally travel farther to eat that big meal than they would a little meal. So it's not always about slowing down. Make sure you're speeding up, speed cranking, throwing that A-rig, throwing that swim bait, and then throwing those larger profile baits will help entice a bigger bite. And then also, you know, slow down if you need to, but it's not always about slowing down in the winter time. I like to fish the warmest areas of the lake as possible and the warmest times of day. You know, a lot of times this time of the year in winter, when it's high noon, high sun, kind of getting a little bit warmer, even if it's only 1 or 2 degrees different, those fish will turn on. So fish the warmest water available. That's going to be south or southwest facing banks. That's gonna have sun the longest. So if you're fishing a fishery, I know I'm kind of going down some different rabbit holes or tips or whatever, but we'll get into the different fisheries here in just a second. But if you're on a fishery, whether it's a Highland reservoir, a Lowland reservoir, or whatever, even a pond, fishing the shoreline that has the sun the longest of the day, right? Longer than the other side. This water temp over here is going to be a little bit warmer, which will draw in the crawdads, draw in the bait fish, and in turn, draw in the bass. So fish the warmest areas of the lake, find warmer water, find warmer shoreline, and you guys will have more success. And then find the bait, find the bass. I've talked about that for, I feel like, the last several months. Wintertime is no different. Whether it's bait balls out on the main body or off of a main lake point, crawdads down in a rock pile, find what those fish are eating and find that, and you will find the fish. So it's not rocket science. It's not that hard. One tip this time of the year, I feel like if I'm not contacting bottom, whether it's with a jig or a crankbait or even my A-rig, I'm throwing it out, letting it hit bottom, and then I'm bringing it right along bottom. If I'm not relating to bottom, I'm getting less bites. Now that we're going to talk about a Highland reservoir and fish suspended on bait balls, that's a completely different scenario. But for the most part, fishing in winter, if I'm not ticking bottom, I'm getting less bites. Okay. Another tip for you guys. If you are a dock fisherman or you're on a lake that has a lot of docks, find those docks that are going to be on that warmer shoreline. More importantly, find those docks that are close to deeper water, that have, maybe the docks themselves are in deeper water, or maybe it's on a channel swing or near a main lake point where there's a nice contour, a nice break, and that dock is right there next to the break. A lot of times this time of the year, those big fish are going to sit down there in that little bit deeper water. It doesn't fluctuate as much though to the temperature, and they're going to kind of move up and eat. When they're up there, they're in that feeding, it's a bite window, right? And then they're going to pull back and go sit back down in that little bit deeper water. But if you can find the docks, metal docks are great. That metal warms up quickly. Metal docks on a south or southwest facing bank in deeper water. Maybe the front of the dock is in deeper water and the back of the dock is shallower water, so that's gonna be a little bit warmer. You know, those fish are gonna move up there midday. So just things to think about, guys. You know, winter fishing is not rocket science. A lot of times they have winter drawdowns on these fisheries, whether it's a Highland reservoir or Lowland reservoir, a river system. You know, here on the Tennessee River, we're down on Chickamauga, we're down 5 or 6 feet already. So some of those Highland reservoirs, it might drop down, you know, 20, 50, 100 feet, I've seen in some cases. So the actual fishery that you're fishing, that whole area is getting smaller, and it's going to congregate those fish and make them more accessible and make them more predictable. All right, so let's talk about the fisheries themselves. Let's start off by talking about a Highland reservoir. Now, for those of you guys that have followed the channel for a long time, this is going to be a refresher part of this, but we're going to talk about some different things as well. But you guys probably know that a Highland reservoir is basically, it's where they've dammed up a river system. Okay, so you're gonna have long river arms, you're gonna have real steep bluff walls, real drastic contour lines. You're gonna have those long river arms with lots of secondary points. You're gonna have some bays, you're gonna have main lake points that separate the different river arms. Typically with Highland reservoirs, clearer water. Because they're deeper, they're clearer, and they get colder quickly. You know, in the winter time, well, all times, clearer water gets colder quicker compared to dingier water. Stained or muddy water stays or holds the warmth longer than a clear water fishery. Okay, you have more visibility in that clear water and it's colder. So those fish can be picky, they can be finicky, but this time of the year, especially with those drawdowns, it really congregates those fish. But picture a really narrow but tall dam. Picture just damming up a river. Right now it's going to make that, it's going to fill up, and it's going to make that Highland reservoir. So where do bass go in a Highland reservoir? It's the steep bluff walls. Again, we talked about it with the docks. They sit a little bit deeper and they come up to feed. Same thing with the bluff walls, right? They'll sit out here. Sometimes they'll suspend if there's bait moving through the area. I've seen them a lot. They'll suspend with the bait balls. They'll sit and they'll feed up. They're always feeding up, right? As those bait balls come over them or your bait comes down, they're feeding up. But those fish can move up and down along that bluff wall. In the middle of the day, it gets warmer. They might sit up a little bit higher in the water column, kind of creep up like they're eating, looking for something to eat. But bluff walls, okay? Long tapering main lake points. Excuse me. That is probably the biggest thing for me on Highland reservoirs. I'm looking for those long points that go way out into the lake. A lot of time, these fish, they have air bladders, right? They don't necessarily like to go up and down or fluctuate as much as they like to go in and out. So a main lake point, something that's a real gradual main lake point, maybe at the tip of it has a break off to that river channel, or it has a deep edge to it. Those fish are gonna hang right there by that deep edge where they can be out there on that point. If something happens, they can bounce off the side and vacate, but they're gonna move up to that brush pile or to that change in the bottom composition. Maybe it goes from like a mud transition to some pea gravel or some chunk rock. Those fish are gonna sit there on that rock. Rock this time of the year is really key. Most of these fisheries, the grass is gone. The vegetation is gone with those lower water temps. Those fish pull to hard cover, okay? We're talking about bottom composition. We're talking about structure, where that changes on that point, whether it's clay to rock or mud to sand or whatever it may be, they will sit on that transition, okay? On that main lake point, not all points are perfectly pointed, right? They might have a more gradual contour on this side, and they might have a more abrupt break on this side. They're gonna sit on the side that has more of the abrupt break. Again, I think it's just a sense of comfort for them and being able to bounce out off of that deep water if something happens, but they can slide up on that point and feed, okay? Creek channels and guts or ditches. I hear a lot of people out here in the southeast refer to them as ditches. I always refer to them as creek channels, but meandering creek channels that are going to the back of a bay. As that water drops out, if it does, not always, but they're gonna sit in that deeper guts, right? They're gonna sit in that deeper area and they're gonna feed up. A lot of times this time of the year, I like to drag a jig through the guts or swim a swim bait or an A-rig or crank, speed crank through the guts, the deepest part of that channel. Okay, they're gonna use that deeper water. Again, we talked about it. It's more stable with water temps. It's not jumping up and down. Typically it's a little bit warmer and more stable. So they like to use that deeper water to travel, and they'll pull up to feed, back out off, just like on those main lake points with that steep break. They like to just put their bellies in the mud, bellies in the bottom, and they're just down there glued to bottom. They will be down there and you can catch them good on your finesse techniques. I like throwing a jig. I like throwing a small swim bait, an A-rig. There's lots of things that I'll throw, but they're in those guts or those creek channels. If I can find a creek channel that has standing timber, that's great this time of the year. Those fish love that hard cover to relate to. The wood doesn't hold heat as well as, or doesn't heat up as fast as metal, but it will hold heat, especially if the tops of the trees are out of the water. They'll heat up. A lot of times those fish will pull to those. But again, they're gonna be tight to that cover. But standing timber, that is a great place to target these fish this time of the year. And then again, these fish like following bait. If there is bait in the area, they will be on that bait. So they will move a little bit to follow them. There are those pelagic fish that are out there on bait, 12 months of the year. But a lot of times you pull into the back of a creek channel, or where the backwater opens up to a creek mouth, okay? Those fish are gonna sit there right on that break, and they're gonna follow that bait around that little creek channel, and it's a great place to target those fish. Highland reservoirs, I typically like throwing the A-rigs, okay? I like to cover water. I want to find those active fish. A jerk bait, because you have those steeper contours, being able to suspend a bait out off of these lips, out off of these breaks, works extremely well. A jerk bait, Vision 110 plus one works extremely well for me in those Highland reservoirs. And then obviously speed cranking if I'm down in that 12 to 18 feet on those main lake points. If I have to go deeper, I gotta go deeper. I can't really do that with that crankbait. I will go with like a jig or something like that. But Highland reservoirs, clear, deep, the fish still eat. It's a great, I mean, some of the prettiest lakes I've been on in this country have been Highland reservoirs. They're just awesome. But one thing I will say with the Highland reservoirs, and sometimes you can pull out 50, 60 feet, 80 feet out off of that main lake point. You can use your side imaging. You know, it's not all about forward facing, right? We've used side imaging. We've used 2D sonar for years, finding those fish out there in 60, 70, 80 feet on bait balls. The fish will go, especially spotted bass or smallmouth, they will go out there. I've caught largemouth almost to 90 feet. It's the craziest thing. Obviously, you want to let them go and don't put them in your live well all day. But there are fish in the wintertime that are out there on those shad balls, those bait fish balls. So if you find that, if you creep out off of that main lake point, whether you're side imaging or using your 2D sonar, and you find those fish on bait balls, that Nichols jigging spoon is a bait that gets down. You can get down quickly and jig it through that bait ball, and you can catch a lot of fish in a hurry with a jigging spoon this time of the year in the winter time. But that's a Highland reservoir. Now let's talk about the Lowland reservoir. Lowland reservoirs, same type of deal. They're just a really wide dam. It's almost like, in my mind, I picture they dammed up a farmland, right? So you're gonna have less abrupt contours. You're gonna have a real wide dam, fairly short. Again, we're not damming up a lot of elevation. It's wide. Sometimes it's multiple dams. It could be a mile or two. I mean, it can be a very vast, wide dam. But you're not going to have a lot of the real steep breaks. You might have a river channel in there, or a creek channel, or some creek channels. But for the most part, the main body is going to be some high spots and some saddles. You might have some wandering creek channels. They're just, typically they have a lot bigger flats. So one of the key things this time of the year, look for the depressions in those vast flats. So, you know, that flat might be 20 to 30 foot, but you might find a 32 foot or a 35 foot depression out there where those fish just sit a little bit deeper and they will congregate in those depressions. But Lowland reservoir, you do have some arms, you do have some secondary points. Mainly you're gonna have some islands, you might have some island tops, some humps, and again, around those islands, just like the Highland reservoir, main lake points, if there's part of the island that actually does break off, that has a quicker or more substantial transition contour lines, those fish are going to be related to that. Typically on a lowland reservoir, the water is a little bit warmer. It's typically a little less visibility. I've been in some crystal clear lowland reservoirs, but for the most part, you know, there's more sediment stuff in the water, and because of that, they don't cool as quickly. So it's just a little bit warmer. As far as like forage, again, it's all about bait fish. So it's whether it's baby crappie or bluegill or shad or silver sides, that sort of stuff. Trout. Maybe you're in a trout stocked lake, lowland reservoir. That's an awesome source of protein for those big bass. But lowland reservoirs, they fish a lot like a highland reservoir. There's typically not as clear, but same baits. I love throwing the A-rig. I love throwing the swim bait. Love dragging a jig and speed cranking. The speed crank works extremely well on the lowland reservoirs too, because it's not that abrupt contours. You can bomb that crankbait out there, and you can grind bottom all the way back and get those deflections, get those directional changes, and trigger those fish. But same thing on the lowland reservoirs. We're looking for creek channels. We're looking for just little subtle differences, little depth changes. They're more important than on a highland reservoir where there's changes all over the place, right? The lowland reservoir, we're looking for those creek channels. We're looking for ditches leading out of or into the major spawning bays, the major pockets. Okay, they're gonna fish, they're gonna sit, those fish are gonna sit in that little deeper channel right there. If you have any grass left, they're gonna be on the grass edges. Most fisheries don't have a lot of grass this time of the year. That water temp crashing, that grass dies. But main deal is hard cover. So it's rock, wood, dock pilings if you can find them. Again, we're looking for those warmer shorelines, right, like we talked about earlier. But they're just typically, they're a lot like highland reservoirs, just don't have the real drastic or steep bluff walls as much or as often. You don't have the real steep breaks, contour lines and such. But a lot of the same baits work well. Jigging spoon, if you can find those fish out there in open water, you know, a crank, a jerk bait, a rig, swim bait. I will say a spinnerbait, right? If you're up on that, and don't be afraid to don't be afraid to check shallow water, especially if you're on a warm day, a nice afternoon. Those fish will creep up shallow still. I'm talking, you know, 8-10 foot, even 6 foot. I've seen them up there. You can throw a spinnerbait around brush piles, throw around laydowns. A lot of times with the water down, it's going to reveal a lot more structure in the water, trees, brush piles, that sort of stuff. But being able to throw a spinnerbait along that stuff or through that stuff works extremely well. All right, now let's talk about river systems. River systems, tidal systems. You know, the Mississippi River, the Tennessee River, the Potomac, you know, the California Delta. River systems, tidal systems, dealing with fluctuating water. You know, those can be a little bit tougher to figure out. Let's talk about the river systems. River systems, a lot of times here on the TVA, the Tennessee River, water fluctuates, they drop it, those fish pull out of those vast backwaters. You know, I've talked about it in videos here on Chickamauga or Gunnersville or well, not Gunnersville. Gunnersville does have vast backwaters, but the water doesn't drop. Watts Bar, I mean, these backwaters are their own fishery. They're their own lakes. But as they drop that water, it's, I mean, you can't see out here, but I'm in a channel that's probably 50 feet wide, but shoreline is probably a half mile away. There's not a lot of contour. So when you drop a fishery 5 or 6 or 7 feet, now you just pulled 7 feet of water off that flat. All those fish have to pull back out of that flat, and they pull into where it breaks off into the main river, you know, the main river, or the creek channel, right? The creek channel leading into that cut. So it pulls all those fish out. That's a great area to check this time of the year. As those fish pull out of the backwaters, they're gonna sit there right in the mouth, that creek channel that feeds that backwater, and then is close to that main river channel. Current breaks. If you're actually fishing the river itself, we're looking for, you know, these fish don't want to be spending a ton of energy. So we're looking for eddies. We're looking for current seams where they can get out of that faster current. And we're looking for cover, or we're looking for boulders or stuff that they can sit behind or next to that break up that current. So they'll sit, you know, a lot like a trout. They'll sit in front of the rock, they'll sit behind it, they'll sit on the current seams on the sides of it, just waiting for that current to bring them bait fish and food and all that good stuff. But make sure you're looking for, you know, inner bends on the river. The actual river itself is going to be slower than the outer bend, right? If that river's coming this way, the outer bend is going to have faster current than the inner bend. They can get out of that current and then feed. But again, they're going to be around the current because it's bringing them food. A couple other things. Deep holes in the river, they'll sit in the holes. Again, they can get up down below that current. They'll sit in the deep holes. If your fishery has like wing dams or barge stuff, I don't even know what to call them, like where they tie up barges or barges dock, they'll get behind those whatevers. Bridge pilings, they'll get behind bridge pilings. I can't tell you how many fish we've caught off of bridge pilings in the wintertime. Even not even a river system, out on a Highland reservoir like Shasta or something, Oroville, you know, dropping a spoon, or even a big, you know, big drop shot along that swim bait along that bridge piling. Those fish just pull to that cover. They pull to something, okay? And it's really amplified or magnified in the winter. They really pull to that, whatever it is. And then if you can't find like marinas, that sort of stuff, those fish are going to pull to all of that cover. So yeah, river systems, it's not too hard to figure out. If you look at the map, you can see where that river turns. You can see the areas they're going to be less current, and then finding that cover, finding those holes, finding those current seams, the eddies in that area is key. As far as like deltas and actually like fluctuating water per day, if you can find, I'm gonna call it like resting water, where there's water on the outgoing tide, water on the incoming tide, it doesn't fluctuate as much as, or as drastic as some of the other areas. It's more stable. Those fish are gonna be there. If you can find darker water, dirtier water, it's gonna hold that warmth better. And if you find some vegetation that's still alive this time of the year, that is great too. But find that less fluctuating water, if that makes sense, on those tidal systems. Now let's talk about the best techniques for fishing a river system or a tidal system. Again, we're talking about jigs, right? A jig is a great bait to fish, whether you're dragging it in a creek channel on a Highland reservoir, or you're pitching it to a stump out on the main river channel. Those fish are sitting right behind the stump. A jig is a great bait to catch them. I love throwing a jig this time of the year, whether it's a pitching jig on a flipping or pitching to isolated pieces of cover, or an actual football jig dragging down there in the creek channels. That's kind of my 1-2 punch on jigs. The different heads help with castability, and then more importantly, it helps with getting snagged. And that football jig works really well when you're dragging. That pitching jig works really well when you're casting two key pieces, or target casting two key pieces of cover. But a jig, blade baits work extremely well. They work well on the Lowland reservoirs as well. Highland reservoirs, blade baits works really well. Spinner baits work good. Again, in that current, if there is current, those fish are going to be on those little eddies, on those key pieces of cover. A spinner bait, a crankbait work extremely well. And then if you are in clearer water, the jerk bait, that works great as well too. All right, now let's talk about natural lakes and ponds. So natural lakes are just that. They're typically they're natural. They might have a dam, but there's not a lot of water fluctuation. There's not a lot of inflow. There's not a lot of outflow. So the entire lake usually heats and cools evenly, right? Whereas like a Highland reservoir, you might be in one river arm that has a mountain with some snow melt or something. I'm just going to use that as an example, versus the other two that are coming from a different direction. You might have one arm that is, several degrees, 10, 12 degrees cooler than the other two arms. You don't have that in a natural lake. All the water is just there. It's going to cool and heat evenly. So you don't have to really worry about finding warmer areas of the lake. Obviously, those banks that we talked about earlier, those southwest facing banks, are going to warm up better. Rock always warms up better. I always talk about Clear Lake, right? The #1 bass fishing lake in the country. Matt and I were blessed enough to live there for 10, 12 years. In the wintertime, Rock, Rattlesnake Arm, Nice Lucerne, Clear Lake Oaks, those areas, that's all south facing. It gets sun most of the day. That rock heats up. So again, we're talking about finding the warmer water, because the baitfish will be there, the bass will be there. And then we're talking about rock. We're talking about that stuff that warms up and holds that heat for those fish. It's just, rock is just good this time of the year. It's good all times of the year, but it's more important this time of the year. So the rattlesnake arm, you know, even the redbud arm, you know, I'm talking about, you know, West Coast stuff, but you know, that rock is really what stands out this time of the year on those natural lakes. And again, you know, northern lakes, the Great Lakes, obviously those are natural lakes. There's not a dam that dams up Lake Michigan or Lake Superior. A little bit different fishing on Lake Michigan versus Clear Lake, but they're both natural lakes. Again, clearer water, especially on the Great Lakes, clearer water. But again, it's finding those little bit deeper areas, finding where those fish can go a little bit deeper, looking for rock, looking for key pieces of cover those fish can sit on, whether it's a smallmouth up on the Great Lakes or it's a big largemouth, you know, on Clear Lake. They're looking for things to sit on. Dock pilings are great, but that's where they go, right? If there's any, the natural lakes don't typically have a lot of cover, a lot of things in the water. So when you do find them, they are great every month out of the year, whether it's pre-spawn where they're staging on it, moving up to shallow to spawn, or post-spawn, they're coming out to rest up on it before they move out deep for summer. Summer, they're going to the deeper stuff, and then wintertime, they're at the deepest stuff on the hard cover, and just kind of is what it is. But if you find that stuff in the natural lakes, there's less of it, but when you find it, it's really, really important. All right, so talked about hard cover. Obviously, if there's depressions or deeper spots, deeper areas, if you can find spring holes, those are great on any of these fisheries. But as far as natural lakes, again, we're finding that little subtle break, a little bit deeper, find that hard cover. And as far as baits, fishing them, again, typically I'm throwing fast moving baits, reaction baits, whether it's an A-rig or a speed crank or a jerk bait. Again, I might slow my cadence down a little bit. As we get cooler, I'm gonna increase that cadence, that pause. I'm gonna rip, pause. As the water temps drop, that pause is going to get longer. You know, it goes from 10 seconds to 15 seconds to 20 seconds, whatever it may be. You'll have to play around with it. A lot of times these fish are going to come up and eat, okay? Other bait that works extremely well this time of the year, again, we already talked about a blade bait. Blade bait's killer, and then a jig, right? Those baits work extremely well, basically in any of these fisheries, but that's what I'm looking for on the natural lakes. As far as ponds are a lot like natural lakes. I'm looking for the deepest water. I'm looking for, you know, there's different types of ponds, right? There's like golf course ponds, there's farm ponds, there's community ponds, right? They put in like a housing development. There's all different types of ponds. But typically, this time of the year, look for the deepest part of the pond, the deepest water. That's going to, again, less fluctuation for water temps. Those fish are going to be more susceptible to the colder weather, right? Smaller body of water, it's going to cool quicker, and those fish are going to, they're going to shut down. So I'm looking for the deepest water I can find. Again, it's typically by the dam if they have a dam. It's typically by the riprap around the dam. Those fish are going to pull to that. The only bait that I would say is different in a pond versus the other fisheries would be a Texas rig creature bait. You might have a lot of stuff in the pond, whether it's laydowns or just junk, whatever it may be. Being able to throw a Texas rig creature bait. Got one right here that I really like. I will downsize my baits just because the pond, they're susceptible to that cold weather. But being able to throw like a little creature bait, that's that little X Zone, their Stealth Finesse series. This is the Stealth Creature. That guy right there, again, it's not a very big bait. Something you can rig weedless and drag around that deeper rock, that deeper cover. But everything else works. Obviously, crankbaits, A-rigs, swim baits, you can throw them weedless if you need to. But being able to fish the deepest part of the water or of the pond is the most important. Okay, find that deeper water. It's not going to fluctuate the temps as much as some of the shallower stuff. But again, those fish are going to pull to the heavy, the hard cover, like we talked about in the other fisheries. Guys, with that said, I think that's it. I kind of covered the fisheries more in depth this time. I know it's a longer video. We're at like, I don't know, 30, 37 minutes or so. But don't be afraid to get out this wintertime. Make sure that you're wearing the proper clothes. Make sure you have a spare set of clothes. Get some hand warmers if need be. You know, bring a thermos with some warm drink in it, whatever it's your choice, hot chocolate, coffee, whatever. Be smart on the water, but don't be afraid of the water. Wintertime fishing is great. Nobody out, very few people are out. The fish still have to eat. They're still susceptible, probably more susceptible being caught now than you know, the summer, the fall. But it's a great time to be out on the water. It's beautiful. A lot of times these lakes are dropped down, so it congregates those fish, makes them easier to target, easier to predict. Find that bait, you'll find the fish. And remember, if you're throwing a swim bait, you're throwing an A-rig, you're throwing a crankbait, whatever, a jig, make sure you're ticking bottom. A lot of times this time of the year, those fish are down low, they're on bottom or close to bottom, and you will get more bites. But guys, as always, we appreciate the support. Down below in the comment section, let me hear some of your favorite baits that you like to throw in the winter time. Maybe give me 2 of your top confidence baits and the type of fishery that you fish primarily. But as always, we appreciate the support. Thanks for watching. If you learned something from this video or you like this video, give us a thumbs up, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys on the next video.